This would be an example with a susceptible soybean variety. You have a female nematode come in, start feeding, develops this dark, you can see this darker area here called a syncytium. The syncytium is a feeding cell site where the nutrients start to flow into that, and then that serves as a reservoir to nourish that nematode as it matures. As it matures, the female just continues to grow in one place and sedentary. The actual males, they come in, they start feeding, then they come back out of the root system, go up and down, and fertilize the females. Then the females continue to develop into that, what you see on the right there, that more lemon-shaped cyst. Eggs develop in it, and then her body actually hardens, and that's what forms the cyst for the cyst nematode. And then that dislodges from the root system, is free in soil, and is moved, and is how they're dispersed. Okay? There's no aerial phase with cyst nematode, it's all soil movement. When you have cyst nematode, once it's detected and you have it in the field, it's always there. It is very manageable, and you have tools available. There's even some new tools that are coming down the road now that are available to help in management.
When we talk about management, we're looking at managing the population. It's so much easier to keep a population of SCN low than to let it get up high and try and force it back down low. So we need to identify it, and then that's the first key. And then once we've identified it, we're going to rely on sanitation, rotation, and resistant varieties to help in the management process. So identification is the first step in managing SCN. We can do this one of two ways. Either visual observation if we're out in the field scouting it, otherwise pull up a few plants, take a look at the root. On the visual identification part, that it's important, and this is greatly magnified, but what we're looking for are these small cream-shaped bodies, kind of oblong or football shape, but get an idea size-wise comparing those to a rhizobia nodule. That they're much smaller, they'll be lighter early on. Once the plant starts to drop leaves, turn in the fall, generally those cysts will also turn a little bit darker. We can still find them on the roots, but they'll be a little bit harder to distinguish by the color. So when we're soil sampling, we want to do it much the same as we would taking a surface soil sample for fertility recommendations. We want to go to 6 to 8 inches deep if we can, depending on the time of year when we're sampling. If it's this time of year, we've got a problem spot and we want to know if SCN is the problem, we go out there, and if here's your row of beans, just sample in a little bit to the side and kind of angle in so we know we're going through the root system. We're more likely to pick it up there. We can either randomly sample a whole field if we don't know it's there, or if we have problem spots, we've got an area that's just a little bit stunted. Maybe it's chlorotic, maybe it's not. Or from old yield maps, we know that it hasn't yielded as well. We can sample those problem spots, and then a good comparison is take another sample outside of the problem area, and then we've got a comparison. Is it present in both areas? Is it absent in both areas? Is it present in high numbers in the problem area and low outside of it? And then we just mix that together, and with the bags, that those will go into the plant pest diagnostic clinic. When we talk about problem spots, where we're likely to find it in the field, think about it. Anything that will move soil around can move SCN around. So areas where we're most likely, if I'm going into a field, if I don't know it's there, but I want to see if it's there, places I'm going to sample would include flooded areas. It may float in with water. If it wasn't all the way up and down the Missouri River bottom close to the river in the past, then it should be after this year. Or areas that are just consistently lower yielding that we can't explain because of soil type, compaction, flooding, herbicide damage, something like that. And particularly if the soybean yields are always worse in those areas, but corn yields are uniform, that's a real telltale sign that we may have SCN there. A little bit about sanitation. We kind of talked about where we might see it along field entryways if we're going from an infested field to a non-infested field. Last thing folks want to think about is in the rush and planting or something like that, washing off my planter, or if I'm doing some pre-planting tillage, washing off my field cultivator before they go from one field to another. But it actually might be the best time you spend that spring. Especially if you know you have fields that are infested, others that are questionable. If it works into the greater scheme of things, either if you have to do those infested fields first, make sure you wash off the equipment so you reduce the chance of spreading it, or if you can work it around the other way, do your infested fields last. We want to rotate with a non-host crop. Most of us, that would probably be corn, but it can be anything else. Small grains, sorghum, alfalfa is not a host, even though it is a legume. It is not a host for SCN. Anything, so we at least get a 1 year break in that we're not growing continuous beans. Most folks are probably doing that anyway. Sometimes for some reasons that we get some fields of continuous beans. So we rotate those with a resistant variety of soybeans when we do plant them. Now the other part of the rotation is when we plant resistant varieties in year 2, 4, and 6 here, we would like to rotate the source of resistance from year 2 to year 4. Ideally, year 6 would be a different variety. Now, when we talk about resistant varieties, that the PI 788 is by far most common. It's probably on 95-98% of the resistant varieties are out there. It's the easiest one to breed in and maintain yields. Some varieties will use Peking, some Hartwig, or Cystex, which was actually a selection out of Hartwig, and there may be others coming down the pike. Some companies have gone where they bring in 2 sources of resistance in the same variety. It may be a combination of 788 and Peking. There are a few of those out there. So it's important to know the source of resistance. Ideally, we would rotate to another one.
A couple resources available to help you on selection on that. Last year was the first year the Soybean Board funded a program where we took the top market share varieties and grew them in infested sites and looked at reproduction. So we took spring populations and fall populations, and you can see that data on our website. There's reports on all that. It shows all the different varieties that we did. That's at pdc.unl.edu.
What we did is we went out after soybean harvest. We had a field that had 1,000 eggs per 100 cc's of soil. That's about a half of your coffee cup that you had this morning, a third to a half of the coffee cup. Well, that ear of corn, and we have what this does is it shows resistant varieties and susceptible varieties. So in year 1, we plant corn. We're assuming a 25% reduction. We're looking at that. It may be different, but that's what we used. It's uniform throughout. From our data that we showed when we planted resistant varieties over a number of years, that we've done about a 36% reduction in the year that soybeans were grown and we planted resistant varieties. Conversely, we had almost a 200% increase, almost 3 times as much, where we planted susceptible varieties. So, resistant susceptible, we get a 25% reduction from corn, increase or decrease with resistant or susceptible beans, so on. After 6 years, that initial population from 1,000 in this hypothetical situation is down a little bit over 100. Conversely, where we started with the initial population, we planted susceptible varieties. We didn't know it was in the field, we didn't sample, we knew it was there, but we don't have to worry about it, but it's not that high. By the end of 6 years, we're over 10,000, almost 11,000.
Let's look at this corn here a little bit closer. So we've got 25% on there. And that's the averages that we've seen over time. Now this is the first year of that mortality study. When we're looking at going to 10 random points in the field, coming back, looking at the same 10 random points a year later. How much reduction do we have? So this was 2009 and 2010, the 2 different years. You can see, I mean, everywhere, a lot of places, you know, some they were almost, you know, they were the same, or, you know, this one had even increased in some of the low numbers. Now, when you look at our average on this, it's 60%, okay? So, when you look at that, that's a lot more than 25, okay? Range was, you know, anywhere from 0 to 98%. Now, we're still looking through this, and I'm really skeptical of 98%, okay, with that. But the point of showing you this is that there's a big range in reduction, potentially in the corn ear. We think it's related to moisture, soil type. And so the goal of this program is to try to identify what parameters are related to higher mortality in cyst nematode.
Over a 5-year period, 2006-2010, we had resistant susceptible varieties planted on 18 different sites, and this is the average of those yields for the 18 sites. That we had about a 5 bushel increase on the infested sites, planting resistant varieties over susceptible. Some sites it was less than that, basically no significant difference to 10 bushel, I think 13 was our highest on that, but we've averaged about a 5 bushel yield increase. We plant the same varieties on non-infested sites, and we see a slight yield advantage to the susceptible varieties. Statistically, it's never been significant, but it sure looks like there's an indication there. One of the things that may contribute to this is our susceptible varieties. We have some of the top dogs out there that they're the real high yielding ones. On the 15 sites, we collect samples from each plot, 4 rows by 20 to 30 feet. Sample it in the spring before any reproduction can take place, and then again in the fall after harvest. In the spring and fall, where we had susceptible varieties, we started off with an average about 1,700. We increased to 5,000. That's where we got the about 200% increase that we used in our example before. Where we have resistant varieties, start off about 2,000, down around 1,400, about a 36, about a third decrease or so. Every year, every site, there's been a significant difference between the reproduction on the susceptible varieties and the resistant varieties.
Here's just a little bit of data we'll show you on a regional basis. In Nebraska, we coordinate a regional program that runs across all the north central states through a pooled source of checkoff funding. When we look at different resistance types in all the different states, and then looking also at how that reproduction occurs. With this study, you know, the best across the region, across the board, the Peking varieties, those varieties with that Peking source of resistance, were the best yielding and had some of the better results as far as nematode reproduction and not allowing as much. The one thing that we're seeing this in Nebraska in some fields, as well as higher incidence of this as we go east of the United States, but more reproduction on 88788 varieties, to the point that in some fields those varieties just don't work very well. The other thing associated with cyst nematode, just a heads up, here in the next few weeks we ought to start seeing sudden death syndrome if it's going to show up. I put it about 3 weeks out. Most fields are more, this is one that can be more severe if you have cyst nematode. One of the things I've encouraged people to do, if you see sudden death syndrome in a field, I'd consider taking a soil sample from that field if you haven't done any sampling. Because it is soil moved, just like cyst nematode. And if you have cyst nematode, SDS will tend to be more severe.